In December of 2012, Tomo, under license from SNK Playmore, released their Neo-Geo X Gold Limited Edition system to the masses. Consisting of a handheld loaded with 20 games, a docking station to output the image to your television, and a USB arcade stick, Tomo promised gamers an affordable way to experience classic Neo Geo games the way they were meant to be played. However, shortly after the launch of the Neo Geo X Gold package, opposing opinions began to pop up all over the web. On one hand, some players seemed to praise it for its quality look and feel, as well as its solid game selection and supposedly near-perfect emulation. On the other hand, others suggested that the Neo Geo X was best to be avoided, and it was a poorly executed concept that was deceiving with its slick looks. For me, the Neo Geo X almost seemed too good to be true. On one hand, it seemed like a fantastic value for the money. Even if the handheld was simply a Linux box that relied on emulation, the portability factor, docking station for television play, and the authentic AES joystick seemed to make it worth the $200 asking price. On the other hand though, various video reviews I watched from respectable sources led me to feel otherwise. In the end, I decided to pass on purchasing the Neo Geo X when it was new, but since I'm a sucker for retro throwbacks, my curiosity was still piqued. Fortunately, near the end of April 2013, Best Buy began liquidating the limited editions for a mere $100, just half of the original MSRP. This alone was enough to make me bite the bullet, and a week after ordering one, it showed up at my doorstep. Now, for the rest of this video, what I will be doing is taking you through the unboxing process from when I first initially received my Neo Geo X Gold. I'll also be showing you the various trials I did just after the unboxing, testing its quality on various television sets. Lastly, once this is all said and done, I'll also be giving you my overall opinions on the package and whether I think that, even now, 6 months after its launch with a discounted price, is the Neo Geo X worth it? So, without further delay, let's get right to it. As you can see, the Neo Geo X Gold Limited Edition package is no joke when it comes to the amount of things it gives you. From my initial perspective, I was actually pretty impressed with the package. The AES replica arcade stick seemed to do an excellent job at mimicking the look and feel of the original. This in itself was a big selling point for me, especially considering it can also be used as a standard USB controller on a PC. The docking station, something I originally thought would be tiny, is actually of a decent size. It's also very true to the original Neo-Geo AES in terms of looks, but with the cool effect of flipping open. This reveals a nice felt interior where you can dock the portable for television play and for charging. As far as the handheld itself, it looks super sleek. It's large, has a nice finish, and it includes the signature clicky joystick similar to a Neo-Geo CD controller. I especially like how the backside looks and feels with its shiny SNK logo and a comfortable texture to rest your hands on while playing. Lastly, I can't forget to mention the outer packaging. The box itself is pretty large, and from a visual standpoint, it does a phenomenal job of being a believable throwback to the original Neo-Geo AES box. If there's one thing for sure here, Tomo did an excellent job with the packaging. So, admittedly, by this point in the process, I was genuinely impressed. However, it was time to hook it up and see if it played as good as it looked. So here I am playing on a HD CRT television via the Neo-Geo X's HDMI connection. After spending some time with it, my initial impressions were mixed. On the positive side of things, well, it works! Haha! In all seriousness, the image did seem to be sharp. The colors also seem to pop out pretty well in this setup. Unfortunately, that's about where the positive aspects seem to end. The joystick itself seemed to feel okay, but there was a very slight input delay from the time I pressed something on the controller to something actually happening on screen. Now, this might not be something the average person will notice, but dedicated fans of classic action games will probably be bothered by this. Also, while the image generally looks good, after a few moments of play I noticed some subtle screen tearing. Now, again, this is something casual players might not notice without focusing really hard, but it was slightly annoying for me. As far as the sound goes, based on previous reviews, I was already expecting poor sound emulation. That was definitely true, however, what I didn't expect to get was the distortion I heard. It's tough to explain, but essentially it's the same kind of effect you would get in audio recording and playback if a clip goes over the 0 decibel threshold. Some call it peaking, others call it going into the red. Basically, it's bad. So overall, my initial feeling of being impressed kind of waned a bit. But things still seemed functional and the picture looked fine for the most part. I would like to mention that as an aside, the game selection screen doesn't have any sound. I had to do a double take when I first turned on the system as to whether the sound on my TV was actually working or not. Another quirk is that when I first booted it up, I was unsure if the system even worked to begin with. It took about 7 or 8 seconds to even pass a signal to my television after powering it up. That's not really a big deal at all, but it should be noted for anybody that decides to pick one of these up. So here I am trying the Neo-Geo X now on a standard resolution CRT setup via the included composite connection. I was honestly expecting more of the same here, but I was actually shocked to find how dark and muddy the picture was compared to the HDMI connection. The brightness is extremely low in comparison, and the color seemed off as well. Muddy and blurry really sums things up pretty well here. The audio issues I complained about previously were still apparent here. However, the audio seemed to come through the RCA cables with much less force than when the signal was powered through the HDMI port. I literally had to crank my volume up to 75% for it to even be worth anything. The controller delay from before was also still apparent here, unfortunately. This can only mean that it has something to do with how the handheld inside the docking station receives and registers the signal from the docking station's front USB ports. Perhaps this is something that can be fixed in an update down the road, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. Alright, here we have the Neo-Geo X hooked up to my Asus LED PC monitor, once again via the HDMI connection. To make things short here, any complaint I had during my first test on the high-definition CRT was still apparent. However, my LED monitor, which is typically really sharp, turned up a pretty blurry image. The colors looked fine, which was fine, but that's about all it had going for it. I think the forced widescreen mode of the Neo-Geo X is what really kills the image quality. Funny enough, when you're playing on the handheld itself, you can switch the aspect ratio on the fly. Unfortunately, on a television or a monitor, you're pretty much out of luck and you're stuck with the widescreen mode. So overall, I wasn't too impressed with the picture in my PC monitor. To make matters worse though, the screen tearing I noticed in my first test run was much more noticeable here. Considering this is only a 23-inch monitor, I'd really hate to see what the Neo-Geo X looks like on something bigger. So, with the main television sets out of the way, it was time to have a go with the Neo-Geo X handheld itself. After just a few moments of play, I noticed an immediate improvement over the console setup. For one, the controller delay I had mentioned earlier was completely gone. This immediately improved my performance in each game I tried, and it made for a much more enjoyable experience right away. Another positive note for the better is that the quality of the image given on the LCD screen seemed to be a little more sufficient than some of the larger screens I tried it on. I'd say it's in between the standard definition CRT setup I tried as well as the computer monitor I played it on. It's not PlayStation Portable quality, but the image seems sharp enough and it's not annoyingly dark or muddy. As far as the joystick directional pad on the unit, it seemed to work well enough. However, I noticed I had to really give it finesse in order to play accurately. Whipping out my Neo-Geo CD controller to draw comparisons, I noticed that the joystick on the Neo-Geo X handheld is actually a tad bit smaller than what you find on the Neo-Geo CD controller. The micro switches are much closer together on the Neo-Geo X, and as a result I feel this makes accurate movement a little more difficult. Also, the stick itself feels a little mushy when you press it hard, whereas the Neo-Geo CD controller I have, despite it being nearly 20 years old, still feels firm. To my surprise, I found the sound emulation here to be a lot more tolerable than when playing on a television. The distortion issue mentioned earlier wasn't too noticeable here, with or without headphones. Also, the slightly off sound emulation didn't sound as apparent. I think part of this is due to the tinny nature of the speakers, where there's not a lot of weight given when the sound is projected through them. They're most likely cheap speakers, but in a way they actually help to mask the more serious sound issues when the system is hooked up to a television. So, with all of those improvements I noticed, I quickly realized that the handheld system itself is the ideal way to experience the Neo-Geo X. Of course, it's still not without its flaws though. For one, the sound volume doesn't seem to go up very high. It's pretty quiet, even when maxed out. The same can be said for the brightness. Even when it's on its highest setting, the screen still feels a little dark. Also, I found that the headphone jack had a hard time making a solid connection, and oftentimes the sound was chopping in and out from one ear because of it. Lastly, when pressing the L2 button to switch the aspect ratio, I noticed that when in the original 4:3 mode, there's a slight wavy nature to the picture. As a result, I found little benefit in playing in the traditional aspect ratio, as the widescreen mode actually provided a better looking picture without any defects. Overall though, I was definitely having a lot more fun playing on the Neo-Geo X handheld directly as opposed to playing it through the docking station. So before I share my final thoughts, I'd like to let it be known that while I was unboxing the Neo-Geo X Gold Limited Edition, I was really excited to open it up, something I haven't felt in a while. Perhaps it was my personal Neo-Geo experiences and nostalgia doing the talking, who knows. Despite that, by the end of my entire testing session, my excitement had turned to sheer disappointment. From the delayed controller response playing on a TV, to the distorted audio, to the muddy visuals via a composite connection and a terrible image on widescreen monitors, I was very disappointed. However, there were some other things I haven't even mentioned yet that tipped that feeling over the top into the territory of good old-fashioned anger. For instance, the joystick on the AES replica stick itself felt like it wasn't making a clean connection, like it was rubbing up against something that it wasn't supposed to be. It reminded me of a pretty terrible Dreamcast arcade stick by Innovation, and it felt exactly the same. Also, the main game selection just felt sloppy, like little care was put into it. There was no sound in the GUI, and when you swipe through the games, the animation is choppy. And to make matters worse, in actual gameplay, there's no save functionality like on a traditional Neo-Geo AES or CD system. good luck ever finishing Magician Lord or Nam 1975. Then there's the docking station, the device used to play the Neo-Geo X on a television set. Now, you'd think that's all it's needed for, but nope, it's also required to charge the system. If you want to charge it while playing, well, you're out of luck. You see, the problem I have with the Neo-Geo X is that not one single part of this package excels to any degree of complete satisfaction for me. For instance, the arcade stick just feels cheap. While I suppose it works, it just doesn't have that same solid feeling of a traditional Neo-Geo AES stick. Yeah, it looks like it, but it just doesn't feel enough like it. The docking station, while it looks awesome, the actual utility it serves is limited and not executed well at all. And the handheld itself, well, while it's easily the best part of this package, it still feels rushed. The joystick itself isn't firm enough, the headphone jack is iffy at best, the screen isn't nearly as bright as it should be, and the sound is tinny, and, well, the emulation kind of sucks. Factor in it feels like the device is so light it'll shatter to pieces if you drop it, it just feels cheap. And that's my problem with the Neo-Geo X limited edition package. Everything just feels cheap. Not exactly what you would expect from a $200 package. Now, like I said, all of these factors made me genuinely angry. I was actually disappointed at myself for buying this package. So much so that I actually had a much more fiery script written for this video before, well, cooling down a bit. In the last week I've had the system, I realized that, yeah, it's not great, but that doesn't mean I still can't have fun with it. On the contrary, I've actually been using the handheld functionality quite a bit. Handheld gaming is something I like to do for about a half an hour or so before dozing off at night, and, well, the Neo-Geo X has definitely gotten some playtime during those instances. Also, another area of frustration quickly subsided when I discovered I can use my Android smartphone AC adapter to charge the Neo-Geo X handheld. Not only can I let it sit and charge for a while if I needed to, but I can also charge it and play it at the same time. This was a big relief for me, as I no longer have to have a special dedicated space for that big-ass docking station, and I can put it back in its box where it belongs. So, the million-dollar question is, do I think the Neo-Geo X is worth picking up? Well, to be honest, no, not really. Even at the discounted price I paid, I was severely disappointed with the package as a whole. I think Tomo had a chance to really make an impact with this device, but they really missed the mark. Keep in mind that my disappointment with the Neo-Geo X doesn't immediately equate to me being regretful of my purchase. I'm glad I have it now, but I personally wouldn't recommend it if you're considering buying it. There are many excellent ways to experience authentic Neo-Geo gameplay, and I feel the Neo-Geo X is not one of them. So, after all I've shown you, if you're still seriously considering a Neo-Geo X Gold limited edition for at least the $100 price point I paid, and you're focusing on the television play aspect of it, I may suggest spending a few extra dollars and investing in an actual Neo-Geo CD system if you don't already have one. Despite the flack that system gets, it's by far the most affordable way to experience genuine Neo-Geo gameplay without donating a kidney. Or, if you're dead set on a Neo-Geo X for the portable play, really you're best off investing in a PlayStation Portable system and one of the SNK compilations there. Not only will you have a wider variety of titles to choose from, but the controls are customizable, the ability to save data is there, and the emulation overall is far better than what you'll get in the Neo-Geo X. Not to mention the modern PlayStation Portables allow you to hook them up to a television set as well. So, there you have it everybody, the Neo-Geo X Gold Limited Edition package. A nice, sleek bundle of disappointments. I'll see you on the next video, so until then, take care everybody.